conference. We'll start by taking a roll call. Um, Honorable Mayor Latoya Cantrell is excused. Honorable Chairman Brosset.
Present.
Uh, Council Vice President Elena Moreno.
Present.
Gilbert Montano, I am present. Norman White, CFO.
Present.
And Professor Baumgarten Force is excused as well. And I see that Councilmember Cindy Nguyen is on the screen as well. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we continue to be precluded from meetings
If you can.
inside council chambers. We must therefore continue to operate in this virtual fashion using the public comment guidelines outlined by the Louisiana Attorney General. Here are the public comment rules that we will follow today. At the beginning of the meeting, staff will read the agenda for the meeting in its entirety. That agenda is also online at council.nola.gov. We will then recess for 20 minutes to allow citizens to submit written comments for any agenda item. Anyone wishing to comment should go to council.nola.gov and fill out an online public comment form. Only written public comments will be accepted. Public comments will be limited to one per person per item. Comments should be also limited to 2 minutes when read aloud and be germane to the agenda item at hand. Public comment will be closed at the end of the 20-minute public comment period, and no written comments will be accepted beyond that point. Before voting on any agenda item, staff will read any public comment received for a pending agenda item. Tiffany, please read the agenda in full.
Thank you, Mr. Montano. The Revenue Estimating Conference meeting agenda for Monday, October 19th, 2020 is as follows. First, we open with roll call. Second item is the adoption of the minutes from the November 21st, 2019 Revenue Estimating Conference. We will be deferring this item until the next meeting. Item 3, discussion of the 2019 unaudited actuals general fund revenue. Item 4, revision and adoption of the 2020 general funds revenue forecast. Number 5, adoption of savings fund certification. And item 6, other matters.
All right, thank you, Tiffany. With that, we will recess for 20 minutes for a public comment. See you all soon.
Good afternoon. I believe the 20 minutes has expired.
All right. I'll give everybody a second to hop back on. All right. Thank you again for joining us here today for this important discussion. The Revenue Estimating Conference prepares and publishes estimates of revenue, which is to be recognized for the current fiscal year by the City General Fund and all other city operating funds. This periodic economic review presented to the Revenue Estimating Conference is intended to provide a continuing source for information regarding city finances, as well as our economic data about the New Orleans economy. As the focus of the issue changes and the availability of various economic and financial statistics become available, this report will vary in its coverage from issue to issue. The item 3, I believe, is being deferred, the adoption of the minutes. So we'll just jump straight into item 4, the discussion of the 2019 unaudited actual general fund revenue. Tiffany, are there any public comments on this agenda item?
There are no public comments for this agenda item.
Thank you. Seeing as there's no comments, I'd like to now turn it over to Randall McCroy from the Finance Department to discuss the 2019 unaudited general fund revenues. Randall? Your mute's on. Try talking again.
How's this?
We hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you. I am going to share my screen. Please let me know if this works. Is this visible?
I just gave you permission. Try one more time.
Okay. Is this visible?
Randall, I can pull up the slides and advance them for you.
That may be a better way. Thank you. These Zoom meetings. All right. Okay. Well, we can begin. Title page. Thank you. Let's see. So in this one, we will cover. Please advance the slide. All right. We will do the economic outlook and assumptions, the general background. Briefly recap the 2018 general fund revenue. We will, excuse me, this should be 2019 general fund revenue, and we will revise 2020. We will give the fund balance outlook, forecast tables, savings fund certification, and then at the end we'll have the data appendix. All right, so here we have the prior year monthly growth in payroll employment. Year over year, you can see the recent difficulties far outstripped anything in recent times. There's really nothing like this going back to Hurricane Katrina. There is some good news in that these decreases, there's a slightly upward trend, but obviously we're still dealing with a very big problem with employment here. Next slide, please. This is the New Orleans labor force and unemployment rate. Labor force has been generally on a very slight downward trend, not just here, but everywhere, with some cyclicality to it. But this is about, this is pretty standard. The unemployment rate here is the big problem. You can see the spike beginning in April. Fortunately, that spike is decreasing, but it is still very high relative to our normal base. Average weekly earnings. This is just a long-term trend. This has been slightly affected recently. People who are not employed, of course, are not counted in their average weekly earnings. And these are not seasonally adjusted, so I don't want to draw any strong conclusions just with the few data points we have in 2020, but you can see the pattern here over the last several years. slight increase up until 2020. We kind of run into some problems here. At this time last year, this graph was wonderful because it showed a record real GDP expansion since this has been monitored. However, this year you will notice GDP is no longer expanding, has contracted significantly, really in a way that dwarfs anything almost in living memory. Of course, there's a global pandemic, so this makes sense. But just so you can see, what we're dealing with here, this is a very uncomfortable situation for us. If we go to 2019 general fund revenue, we have this is the change from 2018 to 2019, just to get us to where we were last year. Property tax was about how we expected. Other taxes, mainly sales tax, we saw some growth there. That was encouraging. License and permits had some minor fluctuations. This is not a particular issue here. Intergovernmental revenue was significantly up, and you will notice other financing sources was significantly down. These are sort of matched. We had the main driver of this was the World Trade Center lease advance of $33 million in 2018. That was a one-time payment. We were very glad to have it, but that does not replicate. And various smaller issues, which we'll cover in a later slide, made up these numbers here. Service charges, just about par for the course, nothing dramatic there. Fines and forfeits, also good. Miscellaneous was driven mainly by a $10 million lease advance from NOBC in 2019. And overall, we were slightly down from 2018 to 2019, due mainly again to the World Trade Center lease advance. Recurring general fund revenue, which is our base, our fundamentals, was up almost $19 million for a 2.9% growth, which was pretty encouraging and was about in line with the trend up until this year. Now we go to 2019 general fund revenue. Excuse me, the comparison from the forecast to the actuals. Everything here in the first section was about par for the course. There will be some slight adjustments to these in reality versus the forecast, but some up, some down, nothing, no big problem. If we look at other financing sources, this drop from the forecast to the actual amount was mainly driven by a reclassification of Harrah's rent into intergovernmental. Now this leaves the gap in intergovernmental revenue to be explained without that difference there. And this seems mainly to be, there was an anticipated $10 million short-term rental estate dedication that was made, or that was anticipated to be made when in late 2018. This has been superseded by a variety of state and local agreements affecting the fair share agreement in a rather complicated way. But that payment did not come through as it was anticipated. Money was received in other ways, but it was not in that $10 million amount that was forecasted. These negotiations were still ongoing, and in fact, parts of this deal were still being completed as of this year. In other, fines and forfeits was slightly down due to slightly less revenue, mainly from the red light cameras, but nothing extremely drastic or out of place there. Overall, the total general fund revenue came in at $689,809,534, which was a 3.3% decrease from the forecast, and recurring general fund revenue was down 0.7%, which is not dramatic. That's pretty well a hit for a forecast. The difference being made up by these one-time revenues. Major increases from 2018 to 2019, growth in sales taxes. We have been collecting more from online sellers. and some economic growth and some greater collections from online sellers for $9 million. A few other items in here. EMS collections were up. Red light camera enforcement went up from 2018. Not as much as we had hoped, but still an increase from 2018. Casino support services came in stronger than anticipated from the state, and of course the NOBC transfer. The World Trade Center, again, is the major driver of the decrease from this. And the Harris rent was reclassified, so it's still in there. Non-recurring general fund revenue from between 2018 and 2019. There was the fund balance use was less, and right now we are looking at about $1 million of fund balance use this year. Medicaid, UPL, ambulance reimbursement payments came in slightly stronger. You'll see some of these other one-time items that were different. The casino support payment came in stronger from the state, and the Go Mesa payment was a big jump from 2018. In previous years, this has been a very, very small amount of money in city terms, you know, $1,700 or something some years. And last year, they have a formula that calculates how much this will be. And last year, there was a big jump in that payment. And including it to this year, it jumped again. So we're grateful for that. But this is the general picture of these. Okay, now for the big one. All those graphs at the beginning were to set up what we all knew was coming, which was a substantial decrease in expected revenue in 2020 than we had forecasted. Growth was good. When the previous forecast was made, things were looking up, and the pandemic took everybody by surprise, of course, not just here, but in the entire world. And this is essentially the magnitude of that. Property tax collection was good. Those are mostly paid, those taxes are mostly paid at the beginning of the year before the pandemic really hit us, before anybody realized what we were dealing with. So most of that was uninterrupted, and got the money there. The big decrease, not quite fatal, but very serious decrease, was in other taxes, specifically in sales taxes and hotel motel taxes. Where this just fell off a cliff. There was no way to avoid it, given the public health situation. You know, we knew this would be a consequence, and we are seeing it. It is definitely very noticeable in sales tax, very noticeable in hotel and motel tax, and in some of the other taxes that make this up, some of the smaller ones, you know, the fairground slot machine tax, for example, although that's not nearly a significant amount of money. This was just unavoidable. As painful as it is, this was going to happen. Licenses and permits. This is not as affected by the pandemic as it could have been. Many of these payments are not as cyclical and don't depend on the shorter term ups and downs of the economy. So this came out pretty well, given that you know, we're in a pandemic. Intergovernmental revenue was slightly up. That was good. Service charges, you will notice, is a very big increase. And service charges is where the HERA's one-time money for this year was booked. This is $48 million, all given in a couple payments this year. There will be some smaller recurring payments in the future, but these one-time payments for $48 million are concentrated right here. Fines and forfeits were significantly down. Oh, excuse me, let me keep going on intergovernmental, on service charges. The EMS collections were down with the medical situation being what it was, fewer ambulance trips, that sort of thing. That number was going to drop as well. Sanitation payments slightly lower, and other things of this nature that just a little here, a little there added up. But our main thing was the HERA's one-time money. Fines and forfeits significantly down. The traffic and municipal court was shut down for several months at the beginning of the year. The red light camera enforcement was down substantially, a massive drop. And this makes sense with the schools closed and the cameras not on. They are not catching any, any speeding there. These are coming back on. The schools, are reopening, but most of the year this was a significant drop from expectation. And the same thing with parking ticket collections. There's just a lot less activity that would lead to parking tickets. Other financing sources, miscellaneous includes the CARES Act money that we received. This is a reimbursement for expenses due to fighting COVID-19. There are various channels that goes through. But this comes in, this would be substantially lower than it is, except for this about 55 million, 53 million that came from the federal government through the state. Some was chopped off at the state before it made it here, but this is where this money is booked. Other financing sources, the reclassification of the Harrah's rent happened recently and retroactively went to 2019 as well as earlier 2020. So that money's been moved. All told, the ultimate adopted forecast for 2020 was 725,879,669, and the drop we're seeing is down to 680,003,013. Very significant drop there. This is unfortunately, there's very little that could be done to fight this in the face of a global pandemic. The one-time revenue, as you can see, is very much buoyed by these payments I've talked about this year, such that the recurring general fund revenue, which is more of our fundamental kind of revenue, reliable from year to year, was down also substantially from 694 million to 559 million, which is a 19.4% decrease. We will talk at the next meeting about 2021 and where we're headed, but this is sort of the base level that we are expecting to go from moving forward in 2021.
Thank you, Randall. And before we dive to the next slide, I would open it up for questions. I think the highlighted number that we've been circulating the most is that $134 million reoccurring. That was that's the big one for 2020 before we even get into 2021. So I'd open it up for any questions from the members of the board. And I did want to acknowledge that both Councilmember Palmer and Mayor Cantrell have joined us on the call as well. So thank you and welcome.
No comment, Gilbert, but I guess, or question, but I guess it's worth mentioning. I know Randall spoke to the sales tax number being hit pretty hard, and it's kind of a difference, right? Because we know we got hit pretty hard in full service restaurants and in some cases, certainly drinking places and hotel and casinos pretty hard, but we did see some increases in things like convenience stores and, grocery stores, as well as pharmacies and drugstores. And more importantly, just in the month of July itself, an 81 or 82% increase in electronic shopping and those activities. So although we saw pressures in the other areas are going down, those online shopping and grocery stores and convenience stores start showing a little upward momentum. And what you see here is pretty much the aggregate effect of all those things. So without those other things like electronic shopping that went up, we would have been hit harder than this. And I know we had a detailed conversation with the mayor, and I think one thing she pointed out was certainly this will probably be the trend of the future, where not just electronic shopping have taken a sharp increase now, but it will probably continue that way even after we begin to go back into some sort of, or whatever we consider our new normal to be. That's just my point.
Agreed. That will be as consumer behavior adjusts. As we all get used to wearing masks, keeping our distance, even as conditions improve. In the new normal, we will be more cautious, and we should see some of these in some of these outlets. We should see sustained increases, yes.
Are there any more questions or discussions before we go to the next item? Tiffany, are there any public comments on the next agenda item?
There are no public comments for this item.
Okay, so item 5 is the revision and adoption of the 2020 general fund revenue forecast. I will turn it back over to Randall from the Finance Department to discuss.
All right, thank you. Sorry. Here we have some of the one-time increases in the forecast. Obviously, we had no idea that the CARES Act money was coming yet. The Harris agreement was still being worked out, so we didn't have that. And there was a legal agreement for back fees worth $5.5 million. Major decreases, it pains me to list all these, but other taxes, almost $70 million down. License and permit fees, a little over $6 million down. Fines and forfeits, $26 million. Medicaid UPL payments, this of course, we knew this would be down. Oh, and one other thing to point out is interest payments were down. In the economic environment we have now, we had anticipated a good amount of interest payments on the city's bank accounts. Cash balances are lower than we'd hoped, and also the interest rates are not very favorable. So we're also missing out on some of that, which in the future should correct, but that won't help us in 2020, and potentially not too soon either. Okay, next slide, please. So here is just a table of these non-recurring general fund revenues written out. We had $6.8 million of fund balance budgeted, and of course, with the adjustments we've made, we're not budgeting any fund balance currently. Medicaid UPL payments were down. The casino support payment and the Harris deal, that was good. Legal settlement. And some of these smaller items here, as you can see, the Go Mesa payment this year went up. Last year it was about 1.3 million. This year it's about 2.1 million. And the CARES Act, of course, for paying back for COVID expenses. And so here's the adjusted total there, 86,904,064. In the next slide, we have part of the difficulty of finishing out the 2020 forecast, and for next week making the 2021 forecast. There's just a huge amount of uncertainty in conditions, what conditions are now, what they will be in a month, what they will be in a year. Really unlike anything in living memory, frankly. Public health conditions are the fundamental driver of all this. We don't know what kind of progress will be made on a vaccine. We don't know if new hotspots will come up. We don't know if we will see a resurgence of COVID-19. We don't know if it will be localized. We just don't know. We have heard from our public health director, Dr. Vegno, some of the measures the city has taken for this, tracking, sort of targeted, trying to use a more surgical approach to any necessary lockdowns or quarantines, these sorts of things. But this will, again, depend on, these will just be a response to what we see.
Randall, before we move on, is there,
yes,
excuse me, if Dr. Vegno is here, I wonder, can she kind of elaborate on some of the things you just discussed?
That would be great.
Thanks.
I'm not sure.
Yep, I'm here. Sorry, let me just turn my video on.
Thank you.
There I am. Sorry. Thanks for inviting me, Norman and Gilbert. I'm happy to speak. I wish I don't always like being the bearer of bad news. But I think there are some things that are within the city's ability to control in terms of how public health affects the economy. And then I think there are some things that really are hard stops that we can't do much about, regardless of how successful we are as a community in controlling the virus. You know, I was reminded today, if you, there's an article about China, and as much as China was the very early hotspot, because they have controlled the virus to a really significant event or significant amount that we're not doing here in the US, they're able to fully open their economy up. And it really does make the point that the biggest threat is the virus. As Randall said, what our approach has been, sometimes a little bit different than our neighbors, is to slowly and steadily ease restrictions so that we can figure out what works and what doesn't, rather than open everything up at once and having to lock down. We saw what a bad idea that was in July. We are probably going to see it again in the rest of the country. Right now, at least 40 states are seeing their cases surge. States, filling up with hospitals. Not us for now, but I think that is because we are continuing on this path. That being said, there will be some limits beyond which we likely will not be able to open up. And even if we do, that will not necessarily mean more revenue. If you look at individuals' attitudes towards things like traveling and eating in restaurants, there is a fixed percentage that hasn't really changed much over surveys that say pretty clearly, I will not do X until there is a vaccine. And so that means that there's a fixed percentage of people who are not going to get on an airplane, who are not going to come to a hotel, and not going to come to a restaurant. Some of them live in the city, some of them do not. So I think that, and we've had some good discussions about that, Norman, and I think I sent you some information. What that number is, I'm not 100% sure for New Orleans, but it is a fixed number. And then if you look at, the other a large sector of our economy, which is convention-based, you would be hard pressed to find a large convention that would be going anywhere in 2021. They are not on the books. They are not scheduled. So those are things that we, I think, can't do much about. What we can do, again, is to keep up our masking, social distancing, all of the enforcement mitigations, to keep our hospitals robust. And I think we will be able to have more small, creative, innovative events, but not to the degree that the city generally relies on. In terms of a vaccine, there are several leading candidates. There have been a few very recently that have had to pause for issues with adverse effects in their trials. This is a completely normal thing that normally happens. Even when we are planning for a COVID vaccination, we will be as ready as anyone else can be, but the logistics surrounding a wide-scale vaccination are incredibly complex. So even when we do have a vaccine, it will be a tiered approach, prioritizing healthcare workers and the vulnerable, and then rolling out to the general population, as supplies allow, depending on whether this is a 1 or 2 dose vaccine, depending on if it requires ultra cold storage. There's a lot of things that go into this. Again, the health department and our partners at the state and NOSEP are preparing for this, but we really don't have a timeline. Best case scenario, we would start this sometime next year. So I don't want to belabor all the points, but if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them as best I can.
No, I think that was great. I don't know, Gilbert, but I guess for me, the point you made is ultimately, if a vaccine is ultimately developed and then we start the large scale distribution, there is a lagging period at some point in which we'll see the recovery that will occur within the revenue streams, probably at the back end of the next year or so. And then in that regard, the year after that, and then what happens after that will be at the behest of what happens following. So thanks a lot for educating us on this.
Are there any other, Randall, I believe you still have a little bit more presentation, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to cut you off. Ready.
Yes, no problem. No, thank you, Dr. Vegno, for coming on and speaking with us about this. The public health situation and our responses, our policy responses to it are very, underlie, just about everything in the 2021 forecast, certainly. So it's very helpful background. As Dr. Vegno mentioned, my bullet point 3 here, public sentiment / consumer demand. Right, some people, perhaps those with a greater taste for risk, may begin to do more activities, but many people with a lower taste for risk, if we put it that way, yes, simply will not do a lot of these things, that they've been accustomed to doing, and we are really at the mercy of the vaccine development and distribution and public use. We also have, as Dr. Vegno mentioned, to the conventions, these are typically scheduled far in advance, so we can already see a decrease in in activity. Almost all the conventions, that we were used to, it's just simply not going to happen. We had some earlier in the year before all the problems happened, but then, and those are just going to wait and see. And even when they do happen, we have the same problem of some people won't want to go to them until we have a good public health solution for this. Travel restrictions are another thing that may affect us here. We have a lot of international visitors in New Orleans. People love to come here, as well they should. However, these things, crossing borders, taking flights, this has become very uncertain lately, and a lot of these decisions are made far outside of our spheres. We also have some policy uncertainty at the federal level, not only because there's an election coming up that may change the composition of the decision makers, but even if the same ones were to remain, we still just don't know what they're going to do. It's very difficult to tell at this point. The cyber attack cast a pall over the 2020 revenue, especially earlier in the year when we had to catch up on a lot of the records. By now, that's not as much of a problem, although there may be some small lingering effects. I think we're mostly clear from that. All right, our next slide details the general fund balance planning projections. These are not obviously official numbers because we don't know what the revenue will be in a few years. However, this is for planning purposes to just give some sort of idea of the kinds of problems we could face if either conditions do not improve in revenue, if one-time revenues are not found, if spending increases beyond what we can handle. So again, this is sort of a textbook exercise, but the bottom line here basically details the anticipated surplus or deficit from the general fund, and as you can see, it gets very large towards the end of this planning projection period. This does not need to come true. Showing it helps it not to come true. However, it is, it's the question of revenues versus expenditures is always very serious, and especially in light of some of the policies we've had to take to control spending this year and whatever will happen next year need to be viewed in light of this chart, because if we can't, this could become a very significant financial problem. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. This is an elaboration of the previous slide here. You can see the adjusted fund balance. If these dire conditions that we've set up in the previous slide continue, the net change to fund balance becomes more dramatic. The amount obligated to the savings fund will look something like this, such that the unassigned fund balance will, if in this potentially bad scenario, the unassigned fund balance takes on a very very discouraging kind of aspect here. We don't again, we're not bound by this. This is not necessarily going to happen. This is what could happen if, revenues and expenditures are not, solutions are not found for this. I know recently we have had to implement the furlough policy here. This is one of the budget team I've been speaking with recently. They are all going crazy trying to find ways to improve the city's fiscal position. We will talk about this more in the next REC, but here just for illustrative purposes here.
Randall, question.
Yes, sir.
Gilbert, the adjusted fund balance for 2019, the net change, excuse me, the 1 million. So you all are predicting that we finishing the year out of 2019 with a negative, with the 1 million fund balance? Is that it? Regarding, I know that our numbers are still being audited because there was, the city asked for an extension. Is that correct?
That's correct, council member. And I'm gonna toss the fund balance discussion back to
Norman?
If you don't mind.
Yes, so as we see the situation now, that is correct, but we still have more adjustments. As you said before, we did ask for an extension. Quite likely we won't end the year here, but as we stand at this very moment, that's what we see. Upcoming months, we'll keep you abreast as we continue to make those adjustments from one year to the next. And if that begins to change, we'll certainly let you know.
Norman, can you just touch on what has contributed to that negative?
Well, I think it kind of
just so people could understand that, of course, the pandemic started earlier this year.
Yes, if you go back to roughly, I think, slide 7 on your page, you have it there. I think Randall talked about the forecast versus the unaudited actual.
Unaudited.
Yep. And so if you see a large part of the one-time revenue didn't appear as it has in the past. And so as a result, that's the effect of it. I think the difference was about 18.5 million. So what we're dealing with as we begin to control the budget, once we see the revenues not coming in, we begin to squeeze on the actual expenses to actually take into effect what we see as the revenue loss. And so, as I said before, this may not be the number you're looking at. I think it's probably a little bit more positive than this. But what you see is roughly if our revenue was coming in at 689 million, the budget was at 713, we reduced the expenses to make sure that we only spent what we actually took in. So I believe that will change, but this is just at the moment.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, council member, and Norm for the explanation. Yeah, as the audit is still ongoing, this is not a conclusive number, but this gives you a picture. Okay, for the next slide, sorry, slide number 17. Thank you. This, one of the requirements is to certify for the savings fund some amount. The requirement is that the formula is 5% of the 5-year average of actual general fund expenditures.
Hey, Randall, Randall, I don't mean to interrupt, but can you actually, for the record, I think we have to go back to slide 16 so you can officially read the revised general fund revenue into that forecast. On slide.
Absolutely.
So if you wouldn't mind reading the 2020 revised general fund revenue forecast into the record.
I'm sorry, did you say slide, that's slide 11? Or do we just need the bottom line number?
Yes, you need to read that into the record, please.
Okay, great. So the official 2020 revised estimate here for total general fund revenue will be $680,003,013. Recurring revenue to the general fund, $559,330,493.
Thank you. And I believe I have to call for a motion on the adoption of this 2020 general fund revenue forecast.
I'll make the motion that we adopt.
So I have a motion from Norman, and is there a second? I think I saw Councilmember Brissette say second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and it's seconded. Tiffany, will you please call for a vote?
Thank you, Mr. Montano. Mayor Cantrell,
Yes.
Councilmember Brissette,
Yes.
Mr. Montano,
Yes.
Mr. White.
Yes.
We have a unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for keeping an eye on that, Gilbert.
So I think we'll go to the next agenda item, which is item 6, the adoption of the savings fund certification. And I'd ask Tiffany if there are any public comments on this agenda item.
There are no public comments for this item.
Okay, Randall, if you can proceed presenting, and then we'll have to, of course, have a motion and fund certification on this particular topic as well. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, yeah, so the savings fund certification here, the requirement is 5% of the 5-year average of actual general fund expenditures. The actual general fund expenditures are listed in the second column here for the last 5 years, which gives us the average of 616 million. And so the fund requirement then would be $30,826,766. The existing balance of the savings fund covers this. Often we have to add to it in the last column, which we don't have to add this year, but we still certify the amount in column 4, the $30,826,766.
Thank you. Thank you, Randall. So I guess I'd call for a motion on the savings fund certification.
Motion to approve.
It's been moved by Mayor Cantrell. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Norman. Tiffany, please call for vote.
Mayor Cantrell,
A yay.
Councilmember Brissette,
Yay.
Mr. Montano,
Yes.
Mr. White.
Yes.
We have a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Randall, is there more to the presentation, or should we open it up for board discussion? Is there anything else you'd like to cover?
Let me just very briefly, on the next slide, this just covers the part of the Home Rule Charter covering this. We don't need to rehash it. And at the very end, the last 2 pages is a level 2 detail of the general fund revenue forecast for 2020. If anybody has questions, obviously, about this, we include this, although this is just a slightly more detailed version than we've already given. And we can open it up for questions.
I'd seen that he's concluded the presentation. I'd open it up for any questions for members of the board or any potential discussion. Seeing none, I'll just simply close with what we've been talking about since March. It is a dire financial position we're in, but we are confident as the administration and the mayor is leading an ability to make sure that we are on the right footing heading into 2021 so that we can recover quickly when our economy does bounce back. There are significantly hard cuts that we're having to make and address both at the latter part of this year and the potential part of 2021. You saw the uncertainty that we're having to deal with and the testimony from Dr. Avegno on what predictive uncertainty is almost all we have to work on. So understanding this has been the most unique revenue estimating conference preparation that I've ever been part of, and I'm probably certain most of it as well. And next week we'll be presenting the 2021, which is very starkly different. As you notice, 2020, Randall talked about all that one-time money from as in CARES Act, which is not built into the 2021, and it's going to take significant lifting to make sure that we're able to close that gap. So barring any other lasting or closing comments, I'd call for a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion to adjourn.
And is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, everybody, for your time, dedication, and indulgence on this particular conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.